Hi, and welcome to Design Reality's Featured Artist Podcast. We spoke with Nygilia McClain about her journey from basketball into immersive technologies and how she works and explores with Afrofuturism in her virtual and augmented reality pieces. So it was a great conversation. And with that, let's just jump right into it.
Name's Nygilia from Albany, New York, 28 years old. So I love to do mixed media art and diving into 2D and 3D realms. So whether it's, 2D animation or actually looking at a 3D object and how can we create this sort of story out of that piece. I think for me as an artist, what my main drive is storytelling. So whether it's, like I said, grabbing a 3D object and creating something different with it, or we look at an illustration, how can we make this a bit more in depth or a bit more abstract? I think that is what my main drive is when I'm creating stories, is that idea of what 2D holds and what 3D holds and how we can put them together and create this whole like different universe. So that's kind of my main inspiration as an artist.
Thanks for sharing that. And it kind of leads nicely into the first question, which you could elaborate on a little bit. But what was your journey into the XR space and how did you progress your artistic creativity into an immersive medium?
So my journey to XR space. So before I even got into the arts, I was always a basketball player. Fun fact. Basketball led my whole life, from when I was really young to like literally going into college. And I believe all athletes face this at this point in time where we're like, okay, we got to kind of have something else. Like we can't just always rely on sport because sport is so physical and body constraining that our bodies will not last forever to do this sport. And everyone has a different timeline on how long they last with it. And plus, like interests change and, life actually is life and things will happen. So it's always good to have something else that you do that you're passionate about. And so when I went to school, like I felt like the only thing that I was passionate about was really the arts, even though I knew the fear factor was that the arts wasn't really a secure job or wasn't going to really pay. So I got into the graphic design realm, which included like marketing and business. I was like, okay, we can kind of see how this goes because it has that sort of grasp and has a base to it. So you can like have a career. And I remember at one point, I thought I was doing good. And then I realized I was actually struggling to understand design. And at one point, my teacher told me that I should drop out and switch like career paths to something else besides the arts. So it's quite interesting how that was told to me, not just because of me not understanding the works, but because that I think some teachings in the arts are kind of biased. So at that time, vector was quite big. People wanted vector design because it was clean, it was cut, and it got to the point. Whereas I loved like abstract stuff, and I remember taking like fine arts courses, and I really loved my fine arts teacher because he used to always poke fun at me. That was the graphic design student in the class because everyone else was doing painting or sculpture or whatever, but I needed the art credit. So I had to take the course. And so as I kind of, appreciated fine arts still because it felt like it gave me that freedom and a break from graphics because graphics is very like brand. Um, I realized I liked the idea of both. And so like from that, when I was starting undergrad, I always was like kind of trialing and doing these different mesh designs. And I remember one key point where we had to submit for the gallery show that our school was doing. And the teachers from the department all had to review the pieces that were submitted. And I remember my fine arts teacher like loved my piece because I did a Bazaar magazine cover, but I did it in a way where the female was gorgeous yet had subtle distortions. So I wanted to show this idea of like imperfection beauty. And like my teacher was like, "Oh, we don't like the blur. It's not perfect, right?" And but my fine arts teacher liked it because of this cool abstraction way that I was approaching it. So my clean piece that I submitted got in, but my one that I did for the Bazaar cover didn't. So later on, when we did portfolio senior year, and we had to like showcase to all these directors and just get point of views back. I remember this art director, I can't exactly remember her name, but she was looking through my stuff and she asked me why I've not submitted that cover to Bazaar because she thought it was brilliant. So it's just interesting how like perspectives of art really change, but it's also nice to get an encouragement that art does not have to be one specific way. And that actually inspired me to really, keep pushing myself into this career. And luckily, I got to do that while going overseas. I got to do communication for 1 year and then went home, worked a bit, came back and did animation because I wanted to get into storytelling. And that's when I got into the XR like universe. It was because I felt that there was this really progressive way of uniting storytelling, abstraction, and like clean design. I felt like there was going to be this interesting like way we can keep pushing it forward and creating these great experiences and not have it to be one single type of experience. So while I did my animation stuff, my flatmate actually had a headset. Ironically, who knows, like when you live with people, one of them has a headset, which I was surprised about. And my teacher was curious how I would want to maybe get into VR. And I was like, hey, can I use this headset for a project? Because we had like a experimental project we had to do. And so I did it. My teacher loved it. I kind of just went with the flow. I was like, this is a really interesting space. And like my teacher told me in England was that not many people can grasp making art in a VR headset because it's so empty and there's no base. It's kind of like you're just in air and you have to kind of imagine everything in its own like universe. So me being able to do that, I kind of was like, you know what? Like this kind of relates back to when I was an undergrad and how I just understood this abstraction of space and maybe not everyone else understood it, but I started to understand it. And now I look what like I've touched in VR now and where my work is today, it's like I'm constantly like engaging in these 2D and 3D platforms and just finding ways to progress forward. So yeah, I think how I got in the XR space was just from day one, I just never realized it.
That's a fantastic answer. Yeah, I like hearing people's stories when it comes from starting with something like basketball to then kind of finding your way or almost stumbling your way into XR, not realizing it. So that's really awesome to hear. And it kind of leads in great to this next question, which is we're really curious about the current projects you're working on. I know you've been successfully selling some NFTs and a few other interesting things. I think you've been exploring in the AR space as well. So I'm just curious how what are you currently working on, and how has your style evolved as you've been exploring XR?
What I've been currently working on is again, like you said, I've been touching the NFT space, Joshua, and that has been quite an interesting journey because with Twitter, I've never really touched Twitter until now. I felt like I was always very much an Instagram person, and I was like, Twitter seems like a semi-toxic place. And I wanted to almost think, okay, maybe I can take it, like give it a chance and try maybe connecting with other artists. And then I noticed this NFT space was about communication. And I'm like, well, what perfect position am I in? Because this is what I do for work anyway. So I started just kind of just making the art that I know I love to do, but expanding on it and combining these VR tilt brush paintings that I made and sort of layering it with photography and then blending those two together and kind of like almost collage looking, but also playing with the idea of like you can like form these VR styles and layer them so it kind of looks like they're part of each other, or it's almost like you can see through what's inside them and create these depths. So that was like playing around with that. And I noticed it started to become quite an interest in people. And they're like, oh, this is really cool. This is different. And they really loved the idea that Afrofuturism really spoke out strong into these styles. And actually, like recently, I would say late last week, um, an art director discovered my work and he told me, hey, you need to go on Foundation. And Foundation is a quite big platform because a lot of really like top people, and like you said about like the whole LA culture, the NFT feels like where who you know, and then it's like people are always backing you because they just know who you are, and that's how you get your representation and your sales. So for someone that like I didn't know really anybody in this NFT space, I kind of just was doing my thing and really just trying to genuinely connect with people as I've always have as an artist. And for someone that discovered my work and they were like, you know what? Here, I'll help you. Here's an invite. I want you to be on this platform because your work deserves to be on the platform. That was such like an awesome moment for me because I felt like people that only get this like invite have been doing this for a really long time, or they have like their own business and a huge following. So I guess it's like I guess I crossed or I broke the barrier basically in that you know, you should stick true to who you are and just keep being genuinely you, because eventually good things will come from that. You know, whether it is that invite or it's just that you feel more confident in these pieces you're creating. I think NFTs are really creating an evolution in the confidence in artists, because it is very hard just to naturally just sell your work and have someone want it. But now that there's this whole movement behind it and progression, it gives people a ton of opportunity to just be themselves. I've seen people pay off bills. I've seen people pay off like medical stuff that their family members need. And that's really touching. I mean, you have to almost think of it like it's some, for some people, it is saving their life. During like this COVID time, it is breaking a lot of problems that maybe were never solved before. But like, hey, this is great opportunity that maybe it may even be short term, but it can have a really long term impact for someone's career or for someone's family, whichever, vice versa.
Well,
So
I really like a couple of the points that you just said there, which is, you talked about, back when you were in college as well, like you would have different professors have different perspective on your art, right? And someone
yeah,
really like it, but then you would find out, from somebody in the industry, they loved it, they thought it was phenomenal. And so, you're talking about how kind of learning to stick with your own style and be true to that, and then finding success through, building community, right? Just making authentic connection, because obviously, yeah, the art scene is a bit of a who's who. You definitely have to know people,
yeah,
but instead of approaching it with a kind of nihilistic approach, you're more just like, hey, this is who I am, this is my artwork, and really just kind of authentically stepping forward. I think that's really amazing. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you. In terms of other works, right now I'm trying to get my first like NFT gallery together, because I noticed a lot of people are having these really cool gallery shows, and I found like some interesting apps and really awesome XR spaces. I'm like, no, I really want to have a gallery show. Like this looks cool. So I'm like really prepping these really nice Afrofuturistic, and I want to say um aesthetic not feminism, but almost like aesthetic beauty in a way, and making this like whole experience feel very like enlightening, but also like, oh, this feels like refreshing to look at, because it's just feels like nature, but in a sense of like abstraction. So don't know how to fully explain it, but that's kind of like my intrigueness to the next bit. And I mentioned in Clubhouse before, I do have this show coming up by like August that I'm going to be featured in. And happy days, I get to have a VR piece or just a video that I can get to showcase in one of the rooms, because I know it's like one of my requests, since a lot of people are doing print. So that's really exciting, and I hope to like really create this interesting piece inspired by Tierra Whack. She's a rapper, but she does some really awesome contemporary hip hop videos that have this uniqueness between like nostalgia and childhood and like adulthood. And it's really fun how she just plays around and raps, and it almost feels very 90s-ish, but in a modern way.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that success that you're finding. And there's a few pieces in there of what you said that I want to continue on that thread. So you have expressed that you have an interest in a lot of your art is in the Afrofuturism realms.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, the intersection of art, Afrofuturism, and XR, VR, AR, what does that look like? And then also you told us beforehand that you got accepted into a PhD program. That sounds really exciting. So if you want to talk about that too, that would be great to hear about.
Yeah, definitely. So Afrofuturism is interesting because I feel like there's so many different definitions, but for me personally, it's creating these sort of parallels within the African and Caribbean community that show potential futures with technology, and also just like potential futures within a culture. So, for example, I can think of, what if World War II had more of a presence with the African community? How would that look? Do you know what I mean? So they kind of like to play with these parallels of history and time, but also like, well, what if this happened? And what if Africa was actually split in two? What would happen to Africa? Like, do you know what I mean? Like there's just really cool, interesting parallels people talk about, and where a lot of Black people like even grew up, not just Africa, but there's different parts of the planet, and how those stories can be told, not necessarily you know, just to like more have fun, but maybe even creating an awareness of, hey, like there is like I remember one of my friends telling me recently, like in Italy, there's a lot of like actually African farmers that help with like tomato growth and whatnot. And they're actually having kind of a complication with that. And I'm like, really? Like, I didn't know this, but sometimes maybe even these kind of stories can make it quite known, because you know how the media would go. They might tell like only specific things, but they don't necessarily highlight some of this stuff that maybe could, you know, break those barriers. Like I said before, like breaking barriers and having a better understanding of culture, and maybe can really point out the kind of different things. So that kind of leads on to my PhD project. And what I'm really excited about this is at De Montfort University, and it's in Leicester, UK. So what's really cool about De Montfort is that they have a whole VR, XR, AR, whatever you name it. They basically have the little gaming suits with the balls, and they can like track motion, people, all that stuff. They have everything, and it's great because I'm so excited because I actually have all the like tools I need to make something really cool. Because when I made my first VR film, it was literally in like a tiny square box in my flatmate's room, and I had minimal space, maybe 2 feet, and worked with that, and had to like crouch and everything. I remember him coming in the room. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm trying to record." It was like, I have to record this angle. You know what I mean? So the fact that I'm going to have like all this accessibility, it's like, wow, my film can be even that much better, or even just the quality of work can just be that much better. So for my like project proposal, it's going to be about experimenting with VR storytelling as a whole, and how we can make that accessible in the AR and XR spaces too. And the topic will be reflective on the British Black community. I feel that recently, while going through like, you know, Oculus and Baobab Studios, I feel like there's yet to be a really surreal film or just interactive experience with like Afrocentric characters that come from a UK background, or we just like I talked about, blending cultures and blending like those ideas of what Afrofuturism actually is, and putting people in that space and making them feel like they're part of the story. I've yet to see that. I've seen like Walking While Black, that's in America, American film documentary about, you know, the Black perspective being African American, which is great. But then it's like you're only getting the African American experience. I think it would be really interesting, especially me being on and off living in the UK for 2-3 years, to get their side of the story, because essentially that's kind of where it all started before we even came to America. And a lot of, I know people here in America are kind of unknown about like UK as a whole. We think it's posh and very ritzy, but that's not true. Like they kind of deal with very similar things we do, but just it's not as talked about. So yeah, like I want to come in there full force and just create this really cool interactive story, so that the audiences can feel like they are a key factor in how this story progresses, whether it's they're a fly on the wall or they're like with the main character the whole time. I feel like that's quite important nowadays, is that, you know, we can't just always keep showing these like history clips or telling people like the actual facts. We need to put them in the moment, for the moment, and then you get their ideas. And maybe sometimes it's a trial and error, which is great. That's actually what we need for VR to actually progress, especially in storytelling. And when it comes to talking about culture, we need to look at, you know, an actual person's point of view and what's actually working. And sometimes even like, you know, a 1 minute experience versus a 30-second experience, what difference does that make? And that's kind of what I want this 3 to 4 year project to be about, is really creating these stories and seeing how that can progress with groups of people, and then what the ultimate success will be for telling stories with Afrocentric backgrounds and fantasy.
That's awesome. I have one follow-up piece to what you just said, because there's so much in there. And the part that you touched upon with how with virtual reality, you're really able to give somebody a first person point of view or a perspective that other mediums might not provide. Could you talk a little bit more about that with this specific project that you're working on?
Yeah, of course. So during with my research, because I had to really like think, okay, what are some great examples that could be with this, and even some that I wanted to play with. So there's this great game, and I've always preached it because it's like probably the most nostalgic yet touching game I've played that's in a headset, and it's called Ghost Giant. And you are a very interactive key part of the story with this like little character named Louis. It's set in France. Very imaginative because everyone's kind of animals, but they have very humanistic traits. And then the overall underlying plot, because you realize the main character Louis is like at times kind of really not telling the whole truth. He's kind of like avoiding it. So you're like, all right, Louis, I'll hang with you, but eventually you have to tell me what's going on. So it gets to a point where the character goes through a conflict that he can't hide it anymore. And then you come to realize that the mom is actually going through a serious depression and she hasn't been out of it in a long time. And he's doing everything in his power to try to almost cover it up, or like, okay, we can do, it's fine. She'll get over it. And I'll just keep being happy and doing what I can to make her happy. And I remember one like key point, we had to do all these different tasks just to make her this birthday cake. And she opens the door. He's like half awake because he spent all night making it. She opens the door and he's like, "Happy birthday, Mom." And she's like, "Louis, keep your voice down," shuts the door. I was like, yuck. It says this hurts my heart, because even though this character's not real, you actually are going through what he has to go through to get to that point and still get shut down. Then you realize this is actually a serious problem. And what I love about the ending is that she's not fully recovered from the depression, but it got brought to awareness that, hey, we got to be there for her and slowly help her get through this. And I love the idea that that's what depression actually is. It's not a one-way heal. It takes a long time. And, you know, Louis is still happy with his friends, but he keeps checking up on his mom, and the mom's hanging out with one of the neighbors. And she makes sure she gets outside, goes and sits around with nature and just like, you know, relaxes. And, you know, slowly you can see the mom's getting better, but like, you know, still struggling, but getting better. And that's how it ends. And I'm like, I loved how that ended, because it shouldn't end like, you know, 1, 2, 3. It should show that she's progressing, and it got brought to awareness that depression and mental health does need to be taken into consideration to help families and societies progress that much further. And I feel that that inspired me to like connect with how I could be talking to these people, you know, in the UK with their permission, and how I can help maybe tell their stories, or maybe take bits of the abstraction of that and we create our own kind of direction and what we can gain from that for the audience and for the characters involved. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. I'm excited to see what you create from all of this, because you really are painting a picture, you know, excuse the pun, of really powerful narrative structure. So it's going to be really interesting to see what you're able to develop through this PhD program. And so I know you're currently like doing a little bit of a fundraiser, right, for your PhD. You want to maybe share just a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, I mean, like many people, I'm not born in a rich family. I've had to really always hustle, whether it's sports scholarships, and that's actually how I got to England. Was I was able to work hard and put a film together, reached out to a ton of people, and one took a good bite and gave me a really like solid scholarship for me to go abroad to like keep achieving my dreams in the arts and while still playing basketball. So that's why I said basketball was so big to me in the beginning, because it really helped me get to places financially that I couldn't afford. And, you know, now that, you know, with COVID, it's quite difficult. I'm still like trying to like still stay in the basketball community scene to some degree, hopefully in the future. But obviously now, like I'm really trying to find the funding to even just get me through the first year, because PhD is quite expensive. But I feel like my passion and drive, even like why I'm trying to like make as much incomes, even with through NFTs, like just trying to save up money, really push the grind, because I've always been about that. My mom and grandma pushed me to always grind for what I want. And, you know, hope that people are inspired by my story and want to help me out too. Cause I feel like for the stories I'll be telling are still very important in this day and age, since what has happened last year and what has happened this year, even within like the Asian community and with COVID, like there's so many key things that at the end of the day, we really need to express the importance of culture and how we can immerse ourselves that much further into that narrative storytelling with audiences. I know that obviously Disney created Pandora and you got to like fly and feel like a part of the Avatar story. And I thought that was such a beautiful piece because it was quite genuine. It was natural. It didn't feel rushed. And you don't forget things like that. So I want to make a piece where people don't forget that experience, because that's what changes them essentially. And that's what also almost even gives them this sense of awareness, like, hey, you know what, maybe that's not the case, because I actually got to feel this situation, and I've gotten to see like where maybe my biases might have been off, or maybe my ignorance may have been like slightly off because I didn't know about the actual problem and its whole completeness, or the different perspectives of that issue. So I want to hopefully create those conversations, because again, culture does depend on people talking about it, whether they like it or not. It's the idea of that, hey, we have to learn to understand this. And the best way we can do it, the best way I know that it can be told, is through storytelling and putting people in that experience. So that is like my passion. And I'm hoping to like get people more involved to help me financially to go over and really get this done, because it's something I really want to do in my life, for sure.
Yeah, well, I know we'll be working hard to try to rally some support for that. And, for anybody listening, we'll have links to her fundraiser and her featured artist profile page on our website. And honestly, your answer to that almost is the answer to our final question. At least that's what I'm hearing. But I'll ask the question anyways, which is, as we kind of continue to watch the evolution of art, with NFTs and into the XR space, I'm curious what are kind of your hopes and visions for the future? Like, what do you really, feel is possible, or what do you hope is possible with this technology?
I think what I hope is possible, and I actually thought about this today, ironically, so it's part of the question. I hope they change up education systems more, because I think that the VR, AR, XR realm has so much potential to really do better for our education systems. Like I said, like it shouldn't feel like, oh, someone has to tell me to drop out. There should be other ways of teaching and learning, because I don't think everyone teaches and learns the same way. They don't all have the same ideology, or this is blue and this is green, this is red. Like everyone has their own perspective on stuff. And, I see my little brother, and sometimes he struggles on things. And I'm like, you know what, if he just, and I know as he gets gaming really quickly, he plays Breath of the Wild RPG games, and he gets that in a snap of a finger. And that's hard to get to grasp at a kid's age. But education, he struggles with a little bit. And I'm like, if they just made it a bit more immersive, he might actually get it, because he's kind of like used to that tech. And he likes Minecraft too. He can build these amazing houses. He's only 6. And I'm like, I know you can understand systems and how you can do it. But I feel like, I hope the future of AR, XR, VR can keep continuing enhancing education as a whole. I think we have a lot of potential in that. Obviously, money does play a big role. So one of my things is, I hope that, if I did ever get the money to potentially help, I love to like donate a few headsets to like small underrepresented communities, so that they do have that accessibility to touch on this stuff and touch tech, and just really see kind of where their interests are, and see if they can make some cool things. And I'd help promote that too, because I feel like everyone kind of deserves a chance, and if I have the platform to do it, I'll help, because it is very hard to get your name and word out there and your passions. So yeah, I hope that's the future, is the change in education.
That's a great vision for the future, and looking at how, like you're saying, we can bring and infuse different ways of learning in the XR space so that it can reach lots of different learners. And within this whole conversation, looking at how artists and skilled storytellers can be involved within the education system too, of shaping these experiences that will cater to the various learning styles and also excite and engage students of all ages. So I think that's a really amazing vision for the future. And it feels to me like it's coming right around the corner. It definitely feels like that's going to be a near future way that we all are learning and engaging with content. So thank you so much for being our featured artist, for doing this interview. Yeah, it's been a wonderful conversation. We're going to have, for everybody listening, we're going to have Nygilia as a featured artist on our website. We're going to have this interview as well as some of her pieces on our website. And then also in Clubhouse, we're going to host a room where Nygilia will have you be one of the moderators, and we can have conversation around art and creativity in the XR space. So looking forward to all those things. And thanks so much for doing this with us. Joshua, do you have any final words?
No, that summarized it great. Yeah, thank you so much, Nygilia. We've really, both Nish and I really enjoyed getting to know you over the past couple of months through Clubhouse, and just the ideas that you contribute to the conversation have always been really impactful. And so, as we started thinking about this featured artist program we wanted to start, you were, one of the first to come to mind. And we just knew it'd be fantastic to have you be a part of it. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to join us. And yeah, we look forward to future conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Nisha and Joshua, so much for having me. I felt like Clubhouse really gave me that much more of an understanding of the XR, VR, AR space, because I felt like it's tech, and tech's not really, in terms of the knowledge bit, my strong suit. So I felt like it's really made me like more intelligent to the core and understanding how these different machines and how things are changing, not just in the design community, but just in the overall community socially for technology and how that's going to progress in the future. So thank you guys for having that room. Like people have said, you guys have one of the best rooms in Clubhouse. I agree to that because it's so authentic, wholesome, and has a lot of empathy, and I love it. So thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Nygilia. And thank you everyone for listening. Be on the lookout for more of these episodes from us soon. And we look forward to connecting with all of you. All right. Thank you.